we're going to talk about the differences between infrared sauna and traditional saunas, but not in the way that you usually see them compared. We're going to specifically talk about the way the heat interacts with your body. Hi, I'm Matt. I've used over 30 sauna brands in the last 5 years. I've tried traditional saunas, infrared saunas, sweat lodges, hot rock saunas, and everything in between. So when you're really looking at these things, there's 3 main points to consider. 1, radiant versus convection heat. 2, impact on the body. We're running out of space for words, so we're just gonna call it body impact. 3, and usability. Usability is really complex because it has to do with install. How hard is it to turn it on every single week? You're supposed to do 3-4 sessions a week, so how long does it take to preheat? If it's a wood burner, do you have to split firewood? If it's a 240 volt unit, do you have to get an electrician to trench a line around your house in order to hook up to the panel? Number 1 is radiant heat versus convection, right? So in an infrared sauna, there is some convection. Everyone gets this wrong. They say that it's only radiant heat hitting your tissues. That's not true. You still have air inside the sauna being superheated. This is primarily an air-driven convective sauna only, right? Unless it's a wood burner, you really don't have the steel heating up the rocks, heating up the wood. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to really radiate any infrared. You can actually get radiant heat out of a traditional sauna if it's a wood burning with a steel stove. In my opinion, this is my opinion, obviously. The thing that most people get wrong is that in a radiant sauna, you have some heat accumulation in the top, and as the sauna heat builds, that begins to extend down, right? So not only is your body subjected to radiant heat, you're also subjected to a little bit of convective heat. In the traditional sauna, when you first turn this on and you go through the preheat phase, there is no radiant heat present. You're heating up the air. As the air temperature builds that accumulates in the top of the sauna, it begins to draft down just like anything else. That's why they make you sit on what's called the upper bench. I think Sam, I can't remember his last name, he has a great podcast, great YouTube channel. If you want to build a finished sauna, excellent information. They're enthusiasts, they're diehard purists. They're purists, right? They believe that nothing besides this can do, whatever they want it is to do. They're still a great source of information. I highly recommend you check it out. The reason that their podcast is called The Upper Bench, I'm not speaking for them, it's just my assessment, is because in the lower region, you don't have as much heat accumulation. You can't accumulate steam. You can't accumulate additional moisture. You can't increase the humidity in the lower portion of the sauna. So your feet always need to be above the rocks, as they say, right? It's a popular tagline. Nothing wrong with that, but you have to understand the mechanism of heat delivery. This is 2 different mechanisms of heat delivery. Here, if the convection is low, if you don't have a lot of time to waste, I shouldn't say waste, if you don't have a lot of time to spend or wait for convection to build, your tissues are getting radiant heat from the side heaters, from the back heaters, from the bench heater, from the calf heater, from the floor heater, from the leg heaters. All these places are surrounding the body in infrared. That's why you can sweat in an infrared sauna at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas if you tried to do 130 in a traditional sauna, you're probably not going to sweat that much. Why? Because air, non-humidified air, is not a great translator of heat. So the mechanism of heat delivery, delivering the heat to the body, is actually totally different. And this is why in a lot of the podcasts and stuff like that, the scare tactics where they say, oh, you can't build heat shock proteins in an infrared sauna like you can in a conventional sauna that's kind of a fallacy. Because the air temperature in the sauna is not actually creating heat shock proteins. Your increased core temperature and your hyperthermic response is what triggers the event in the body to make heat shock proteins. So heat stress, look at it like this. If that were true, if you could only make heat shock proteins in a conventional sauna, you wouldn't be able to make heat shock proteins in a jacuzzi, in a hot tub, in a hot bath. So then why are there studies on PubMed and research in other countries that show folks making heat shock proteins using hot bath therapy, right? So we have to expand our minds a little bit and really break down like, okay, is this nonsense? Is this some, keyboard warriors on the internet just perpetuating some, narrative or something? Or is there actually some science related to what's the mechanism of heat delivery, what's causing the hyperthermic response, how long does it take to initiate that, and how long does it sustain it? So For some people, they prefer the high heat of a traditional sauna. No issue with that. For other people, especially people that struggle with illness, they can get a great sweat, increased core temperature without subjecting themselves to 200, 220 degree, air. They find this more comfortable. No issue. If you want the hard hitting high heat of a wood burner, I personally love the idea of you not having to have it plugged into anything. But, that leads us to point number 3, usability. I live in the city. I live in Orlando. I really don't know what my neighbors would say or how many times they would have called the fire department by now if I was, number 1, carrying around an axe in my yard splitting firewood. Number 2, if I had my little smokestack, like if I had it my way, and you guys don't know this about me, I grew up in Maine splitting firewood as a kid for my grandfather. It wasn't optional. Saturday morning came around, he's like, "What do you do today?" "Well, I'd like to go ride a four-wheeler or ride a bike." I don't know about that. "You see those trees we saw yesterday? We ought to go get a load of firewood." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I really want to play. Da, 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 da." Okay. I'll tell you what, when you're freezing your ass off when it's 20 below zero in the middle of winter, don't come to me asking me for a stick of goddamn firewood, And I was like, he would shame me. I was like, okay, maybe we should go get a load of firewood so we don't freeze this winter. He's like, "All right then, I'll get my boots on and be ready in 10 minutes. Right. So what I'm saying is, if I had it my way and if the usability was different of these, I myself might actually choose a wood-burning traditional sauna. But I do live in Orlando. I do live in the city, just like a lot of us. The thing that stops me from this is the maintenance and the install. It's actually easy to install a wood-burning traditional sauna. In my opinion, it's a little more difficult to install a dry electric or a steam, 240 volt sauna. Because in my house, let's just say, this is pretty rudimentary, but let's just say my house is here. We got a tree or something in the backyard, and I want to put my little sauna here. Well, the power panel is around the front, and the garage is here, right? So what would we have to do in order to install this? Well, the only option, and I'm not going to tear my walls apart, I'm not going to rip my drywall out so I can run conduit through the thing. The only option then is to have an electrician trench in the ground, and I'm not saying underneath the house, I can't draw in 3D. We're going to trench a line over to where this thing is, pour a paver pad like this, set up a quick disconnect box, and then when the sauna arrives, all the wiring and stuff is ready to be set up. This is extremely expensive, and you kind of need to know exactly what you're doing in order to orchestrate an install process like this. There's a lot of things that you can screw up. The other thing you have to worry about back here is drainage. You want to make sure that if you have a supplemental roof structure or if there's anything else going on in the landscaping that doesn't funnel water toward the sauna, and then also rain splash up. You want to make sure that there's adequate drainage away from this. A lot of times you need to put in a French drain system in order to do that. You could say the exact same thing for an outdoor infrared sauna. This isn't like, I should have prefaced that. I should have said, hey, this isn't just radiant versus convection heat or traditional versus infrared. It's installing an outdoor versus an infrared, an indoor sauna, because what we're going to get to at the end of this video is the reason why most of us choose this is because it's easy. It's easy to set up. It's easy to use. It's a lot easier to do 3 or 4 sessions a week without going through all this. I'm not here to talk you into one versus, one is better than another. I'm just here so that you truly understand what is the impact on the body and what is the actual usability. Because if this install process is complicated enough to drive you batty and you don't do anything, over the next 10 years, you won't implement heat therapy into your life. And I'm a proponent, and what I take a stand for is that somebody doing one of the 2 of these, I don't care which one it is, you choose what's right for you, but you have to understand you can get the same body impact with a different method of heat delivery at a different temperature in different equipment inside your house just like you can outside. But super quick, let's erase this really quick. I'll turn it back on as soon as we get rid of this and go over another option. So in contrast to the complications of doing an outdoor sauna, it doesn't matter if it's infrared or traditional. What I want to talk to you about now is an indoor sauna. Most of the time, especially if you live in an apartment, like it's ease of use, right? Ease of install. If you live in an apartment, let's just say, this is your living room. This is a terrible drawing, but this is a couch. This is your coffee table, whatever. You've got a wall over here where you have some space. You really only need 36 to 48 inches to have a sauna. They look really nice. You can integrate them anywhere, spare bedroom, whatever. But what I want to talk to you about is you're not stuck if you can't have one of these. If you can't have a wood burner, if you can't have an outdoor sauna, there's tons of great options and they all work really well. And they'll help you increase the chances of you getting the benefits from infrared, not infrared. Most of the indoor saunas are going to be infrared because of the ease of install, which is what I'm going to talk to you about in a second. But it's going to help you increase your chances of getting the heat therapy benefits over the course of your life, the next 15, 20 years. So if you have a living room or a spare bedroom here, my writing needs to improve, wouldn't you say? And you have like some area you can tuck one of these in. If you have a 120 volt outlet in that room where you could just like install or plug in a little vacuum cleaner. I know that doesn't look like much to you, but for me, I'm thinking I'm cleaning the floors with it. You know what I mean? But basically, there's equipment that can give you the sweatability and the body impact of both of these, no matter what your situation is. So if you're in an apartment, if you're in a townhouse, if you're in a condo, the HOA is not going to let you do certain things. And you're not about to rip the drywall open in your house to run a dedicated circuit, but you don't have to. There's options for you that will give you this, and in some cases give you this, although this is more difficult. You need at least 20 amp dedicated 120 volts. Most of the time 15 amp, 20 amp dedicated to 40 volt in order to run one of these, even an indoor model. But these come in tiny packages. I just reviewed one. It was a Heavenly Heat Eco. You could fit it anywhere. We put it in a closet. You've got the Radiant Health One Person. It's a 36 by 36 inch footprint. Works on a regular outlet that you could power a vacuum cleaner with. You've also got the ClearLight Premier IS1, same thing, a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, same outlet, same circuit. So what that's gonna do is give you the ability to have radiant and convective heat in any dwelling that you may live. And if you're not in your forever home and you end up moving, you can pack it up and take it with you.